electric vehicles are assets when they are moving, but with V2G, they can become profit centers when they are parked. Welcome back to another episode of EV Charging Minute. I'm here with Tony Booth, your host and founder of Stay in Charge, bringing this to you every week, hoping you find some ways to help you maximize the ROI that you have in electric vehicles and electric vehicle charging in the commercial real estate space. Focused a lot more on the charging, obviously, because that's where our expertise is. And I like to share the stuff we learn along the way and, kind of share some good knowledge out there. So everybody that's looking at this can learn a little bit, figure out some things, and help you kind of make the right decisions when you're embarking on this EV charging journey. Today, we're talking about vehicle to grid. So, we're talking about turning that idle battery capacity, right? Taking that battery capacity and maybe turning it into some revenue. So vehicle to grid is really about, being able to transfer energy from the batteries back to the grid. There's a lot of talk about this. It's been being worked on, and there's a lot of different circles out there that get talking about this. And I'll be honest, when I first heard the conversation, it kind of, there was some people talking about it. It was in an event, and I got into a thing where they got talking about this a lot. And I don't know that I totally, like, I couldn't buy into what they were saying at first. And I still think that there's a lot of talk about this that's a little overzealous on this. You'll get into some circles where, there was people in there talking about this, how they expected that people with EVs at home were going to eventually be able to drive for free. Oh yeah, you'll be able to, you'll get the power company's going to, give you all your power for your vehicle. And I don't think it's going to ever get there. I think that's a little bit of a stretch. I think there's a lot to, consider there before that becomes a kind of a reality. But there is a way to shave some cost and make some additional revenue here that will be there. It's going to take a little bit of time, but it could get there, and there could be ways of things. And that's what we're going to talk about today. I'll start first with, what is vehicle to grid? Like, what is the whole thing? You also hear people talk about vehicle to building and stuff like that. So essentially what this is all about is really energy storage. So anybody that's familiar with kind of off-grid kind of things, or, solar, grid-tied solar, things like that. If you're familiar with like the Tesla wall pack, where they would come into your house and they'll put solar on your house and put a wall pack and store energy. Essentially, vehicle to grid is turning your battery that's in your vehicle into a storage. So it's sharing power, obviously taking it from the grid at first and putting it into the battery, and then later on moving that energy back from the battery into the required demand, whether that's in your building, and an appliance, a building, or back to the grid. So it's really about energy storage. So if you think about this, how could this play out? So if you think about, you've got a car, let's say, you've got a car sitting in a lot, right? Maybe you come home, you park your car in the lot at a apartment complex or something that has this going on. You've elected to participate, whatever, and you get home and your car is at, let's say it's at 60%, and you plug in, you start charging. You need to be 80. Your car's set to be at 80% in the morning. Well, we know that overnight your car's going to get plenty of time to charge. So while sitting there, and you plugged in the middle of the afternoon or in the early evening, and all of a sudden there is a demand spike on the grid. If the grid can go in and pull some of that energy back from your vehicle, so maybe it goes in and, like I said, you're at 60, you plugged in, all of a sudden there's a spike in the grid. Maybe the grid goes in, or your system says, okay, I'm going to sell 50 kilowatts or 20 kilowatts or 30 kilowatts back to the grid right now. What's that worth? Maybe $2-3. But think about if your overnight charge was going to cost you $5, you got $2 from selling this power during peak time, and you still got up with an 80% battery like you needed in the morning. You just saved 30% on your charging cost, right? So that's one area that this can kind of work. Another area is offsetting peak cost, right? So in a commercial, we talk about this quite a bit, but in the demand charges on a commercial electric grid, you can have some pretty considerable cost if you have access to EVs that are plugged into chargers during peak demand times, and I can keep my building from going over a set peak. Maybe that saves me $1,000 a month in my electric bill. So there's ways that this can work, right? Like it's there, right? It's actually being done today. There are programs out there. There's a whole ton of test pilot programs going on. So there is a reality here. I still, I don't know the scalability of it. I don't know how commercially viable it gets over the long term, but it is possible. And that's why I want to, share a little bit about it. And I think if you're building the right things, you need to pay attention to this and do a lot more research. But just from a grand scale, energy storage is viable. There's no question about it. We use it a lot. The grids use it a lot. It's a big thing for grid stability, ramp control, and things like that. So energy storage is a thing. It does generate revenues. It has some things, but it does have its challenges as well. Like the cost of battery storage is not, we haven't really solved that in a very efficient way yet. There's too much loss of energy in transferring states that it doesn't quite get there, from a cost perspective yet. But that's where a lot of people are thinking that, hey, the EVs may make a big difference in that, because you're using the energy that's coming out of that battery storage for more than just feeding the grid, right? So that loss and stuff in there, that energy transfer loss is not as relevant. So there is some possibility here. There's potential for this to grow. I'm not sure if the lift versus reward will work out yet. I think in many places in the large scale kind of thing, a lot of these things can really work well in a large scale, but a broad scale, maybe not. Is it something that every commercial property is going to make some revenue off of this one day? That I don't know if everybody gets there, but obviously there are going to be, situations and locations and times that this really does make sense. It can definitely help if you've got, fleet management people. This is really big for any fleet manager to think about, because if you're thinking about running a fleet of electric vehicles, delivery vehicles, or whatever they are, and you can find ways to shave 2, 3, 4, 5, 10% on those transportation costs, then this is probably well worth it. Okay, so this is definitely something that will get there over time. It will be something. It's definitely not just a flash, it's not one of those things, just a bright idea. It is commercially viable. Is it commercially scalable to a point that everybody will pay attention to this? I don't know, right? Like there's some things that definitely make this a little bit more difficult. A couple of big things just to think about, right? Like my first thoughts on this when I heard it was like, well, number one, a lot of your peak demand on any grid scenario is helping, is happening, 4 to 8, 9, right? Like, so you have this, this demand is often happening when people are on the roads, right? Like people are traveling home, or if you just got home, how much capacity does your battery have in it to help shed this stuff? So that's where it gets a little bit tricky on that side. And then, what's it take to do all this? And if I've got, for this to be like a home thing, Obviously, if I have solar and I have a whole system already set up and I'm interconnected to the grid, then it makes sense. If I don't have all that, can I really make enough to offset the cost of putting something this together? But it is there. It's something I want to talk about. I want you to pay attention to. I know when our team is working with anybody in a fleet space, we are definitely deep into this. Not so much in the public realm, because I don't, if I've got chargers at a hotel, I don't have the right necessarily. I mean, I can put it into my terms and conditions, but is it really something where I can go start taking power out of somebody's battery that parked there? I don't know when they want to have their battery full and charged. Maybe they're leaving at 1 a.m. to go to their next, to continue their journey. And I go in there and take some of their battery power. It just there's some parts that make it difficult, but there's some things that make it really viable. So next, I want to look at what are these financial opportunities, because this is where it really matters, where you can think about it. The one that's really being done so far today, and kind of the low hanging fruit of this, is just some demand shaving, right? So this is the opportunity to save some money on your existing utilities. If you have a fleet of vehicles that are, coming in, let's say you got a fleet of vehicles that are out doing AM delivery. You got AM delivery fleet, and they come back and maybe they park at the loading docks, and they're going to get loaded, overnight. So they're going to plug in and start charging and everything, and if they've at that time, they come in, they roll in at 1, 2, 3 in the afternoon, and they're plugging up. Well, your building is starting to go into peak demand. So if you have a good system that can say, okay, we've plugged all the fleet in now, and we've got 300 kilowatts of capacity sitting in the parking lot. We know we need X number the next morning for this fleet to go do its work. We know we can add, let's say we need 800 kilowatts in the morning. Like we need 800 kilowatts by 3 in in our batteries. We currently have 300. We know that from the hours of 9 to 2 in the morning, we can put 1,000 kilowatts back in our vehicles. Okay, so we can use some of this 300 kilowatts we got sitting in these batteries to offset our building demand. So again, if that saves me on a monthly basis $1,000 or $500, and I didn't do anything but have some good software and a system set up to do it, then that's a good way to shave some money. Obviously, we can't eliminate all demand in your building, most likely, but it's that peak demand, right? It's that peak, setting that peak demand, making your utilities more predictable, right? If we know that, in the summer, because a lot of that happens, we've talked about this a few times, summertime is when a lot of this happens. So you can offset your AC system or something like that by having your vehicle capacity there available. So that's the demand shaving side. It does work. It can be it's not super complicated either. It's not like you need this is the easiest. Like I said, it's the low hanging fruit. You need compatible systems in your building, right? The energy management systems and things like that. You need the right charging systems and the right vehicles. But other than that, if you have the right little kind of pieces to plug together, it's not a very complicated little thing to pull off. So if you have vehicles that might be sitting around at times that you have peak energy demands, then this is something to definitely look at, to consider. This could be if you have buses, if you have delivery vans, if you have even like airport shuttles, those things like that. Hotel shuttles, if you look at your hotel shuttles, are they running full bore during those peak times, or does the peak of the shuttle actually, peak in the morning and later in the evening? And if so, those electric, having a couple electric shuttles plugged into your building when all those PTEC units are clicking on, or when you're in the middle of running your commercial dryers, right? Like we could be, shaving some demand there, saving some money. So those things do work. It's not a big, this is the easiest lift, right? It's not a hard stroke to get to this. You just have to have all the right compatible stuff and have a good person to help set it up. So that's one way. The next one is a thing out there. It's kind of grid support services. This is a way that your fleet can generate some revenues. This is where, like, one of the people I was listening to talk about this in the beginning was thinking that the average homeowner was going to be able to do some of this. I don't know that it gets to that level, but this is where you're basically selling power back to the utility, or having the availability of that power. A lot of times in this side, this grid support services, the utility companies will do programs with people where they may not use your power every day, but they're going to pay you. They'll pay you a monthly fee to have this capacity available. So you're like a reserve bank for them. And so, they build a program around your fleet that says, okay, every day, Monday through Friday, you're going to have 400 kilowatts in storage sitting behind your meter for me if I need it. So that way, if they have a surge or they need power on the grid, they flip that switch and start taking power from your vehicles. They don't need it anymore. They turn it off, and obviously your vehicles still charge overnight because you set all these things to the parameters that it doesn't impact your operations, but you use that excess capacity there. So this does work. There's a lot of pilot programs going on with this. It's kind of a unique scenario where they're going to pay you to have demand. So it's not this is kind of one of those things. You get into these programs, they're typically a monthly program. They're paying you something every month, and then they're able to kind of have you there. They know that you're there. Putting these together gets a little bit more complicated. Okay. Obviously you have to have a participating utility that's in this program or doing a program like this. And then all your other systems, chargers, vehicles, software, the integrator, and all those things all need to come together to do this. Really, when you start looking at this too, and we're going to get to some of the things to consider, but you want to make sure that you have a good GPS route finding system for your vehicles as well, so that you have a good prediction and understanding of how much power each of your vehicles need the next day, so that how much gap you have there to give up that can be given up from at 6 o'clock at night. Between 6 and 7, can I give up 100 kilowatts because I know I can get it all back overnight? Those are the things that you want to be sure of. But this is something that can be put together. And the last way that we can generate some additional income off of V2G is what they kind of call pricing arbitrage. And this is basically like, okay, at nighttime, you might be able to buy power at a lower rate. So if I can buy power at, let's say, 10 cents a kilowatt hour, and then in the middle of the afternoon during peak time, I know that if I feed power back to the grid, my utility will pay me 15 cents a kilowatt hour. Or if I feed it into my building, I can eliminate where I'm paying 20 cents a kilowatt hour, right? Like I can eliminate some usage where I'm paying 20. So that's your kind of pricing arbitrage. Again, part of that's a savings, part of that's a revenue thing. But the idea there simply is buying it cheap, selling it at a higher price, or using it during a higher price. Okay. Another way we can do it, this is very similar to the grid support services as far as the setup. You do have to have, it's definitely a more involved solution. You got to have the integrators, you got to have the equipment, the software, the vehicles, all that stuff needs to be compatible and capable of doing this vehicle to grid stuff, to do this whole thing. So those are the things we can do with them to generate some revenue. I will, like I tell everybody, don't think that this is like you're not going to eliminate your transportation costs. You're not going to get free charging out of this. There's things, it's not that lucrative, but you will be able to get an ROI on the, putting a system like this in, obviously it's going to increase the cost of your charging network, your whole charging system, but those costs plus will be offset by, what's available here. So it's definitely worth considering, looking at, if you're doing anything today from a fleet standpoint. It is definitely something to pay attention to. You definitely want to look at this, figure it out, make sure you're talking to people to help you on that. So let's jump into a little bit at what you want to consider now. Many of the places that we work with, the utilities and everything, they're still not there yet today with all this. They don't have it quite ready to go, but we're always making sure we're going to be prepared. So what you want to do to be V2G ready, if you can't do a program today, if you can do one today, go right ahead, and that's kind of the last step we're going to talk about. But first thing now, if you're not, well, let me talk about this first. Start with the experts in your utility companies, right? So anything you're doing when you're doing this, talk to some of the people. Like if you're talking with a EV charging company about putting chargers in, you've got a fleet of equipment, or you're talking to a consultant or an engineering firm saying, hey, I'm going to convert my delivery fleet to electric. Let's start looking at this. If you're talking to anybody like that, make sure that they're looking into vehicle to grid. Make sure that they have experts on their team. A lot of companies will often start with like an engineering firm, which is obviously where the design of putting charging in all needs to start there. However, they may not be as versed on vehicle to grid. They may not be as versed on the software that you need. So in any case, in this instance, what we recommend to anyone that's looking at any type of major kind of infrastructure and upgrades in EV is make sure you're talking to several different experts in several different swim lanes, because there's probably very few, if any, people out there company-wise that are going to have all the answers, that are going to know what it takes on the electrical upgrade side, to, the engineering side, on the software side, on the building management side, on the, the route planning side, and all those different things. There's so many different little pieces, and everybody has their little swim lanes, but is anybody really understanding how to connect that all together? So what I recommend to every group that we work with or company, our team recommends they start talking to those different providers. Let your EV charging service provider kind of be the quarterback of all this, because we're really the ones that have to ultimately connect it all together. But like, for instance, when we work with a fleet, we need to talk to who does their routing and their GPS and their vehicle monitoring and all that kind of stuff. What do you have in your system already? What manages your building? What manages your your utility side of things? All these things need to start figuring out how they talk together. And we may need different software. We may need different integrations to make them all communicate. So the charging group is really we're kind of the ones in the middle, right? Like that everything goes through. So make sure you're getting a well-rounded group of people to talk to about this, so that you can understand what's going on. And utility companies are going to be one of the first ones that should be contacted, because if they have programs, they're going to have some experts as well. And you might be talking to a particular, like if you start with your GPS company and they've integrated with a certain software company and they do that, you go down that road. And then when you finally get to your utility, they say, oh, well, No, we've integrated with this company over here to do vehicle to grid stuff. So you may have to, not that you have to switch providers, but you may have to, you may only be trying to figure out how your GPS system talks to their system or whatever, right? Like there's the utility company's got the ultimate control here on what they're going to allow to connect to their grid and run things. So make sure you talk to them as well. Then if you're, after you've talked to them and you're not, maybe you're not ready to totally move forward, there's nothing happening yet, then we want to make sure we're at least prepared for it, right? Like the upcharges to make sure your hardware is ready for vehicle to grid is very minimal versus having to rip it out and replace it all. Vehicles, there's not a whole lot of vehicles out there yet, but I know that there's some vehicles that are saying that they're already preparing to do this. They just don't have, the system all set up. Maybe it's software, maybe it's things like that. So make sure you're looking at that, because those are going to be the two most important components up front are the vehicle and the hardware, because obviously those are your big chunk expenses that if they're not going to be compatible, will completely eliminate it. Software can be changed. Those things can all be changed. Software can be upgraded. Our software is ready for 15.118, but it's not totally turned on yet, right? But that doesn't require anybody that we're tied to replace anything. It's just when it's going, it's going. So make sure that you focus first on the hardware and the vehicles. There is a UL standard, UL 1741, which is kind of the standard written around vehicle to grid. So these people have to comply with that. So make sure you're doing your research there, understand what it is, this like I said, and know what those costs are. On the rest of the side, the software, the other compliance side or standard side is make sure that your hardware, your vehicles, and all that stuff are ISO 15118. Okay. I know that comes on the software and the hardware side. Vehicle side, I know. So the 15118 is all about communicating between chargers and the vehicles. So I don't know if the standard applies necessarily to the vehicle itself, but I would be making sure that I'm talking to any of my manufacturers to know that I can do all this stuff, that my 15118 software is going to be able to work with the vehicle. So make sure you have all that stuff figured out when you're talking to these different people, the integrators, because one of the big key things here is there is going to be a body that we might call like the integrator, right? There's going to be a layer that's going to sit between all these charging systems and the grid, right? And that's your grid integrator. And there's going to be a program, software, people that all sit in that little level there. So make sure you're talking to some of those people as well to really understand what's going on. Those are the ones that you're often going to find out from your utility company, that they are the ones that have been designated by the utility company. So make sure you're looking into all that stuff to understand where that is. So you can't ask too many questions here. You can't get too far down. Make sure you're getting the answers that you need to, and just be ready. Like understand, and if somebody's telling you, hey, we have these vehicles, but they're not V2G ready yet, but we're going to be able to upgrade them. Okay, try to figure out what that upgrade means, right? Like, does that mean you're going to send it off to the factory and they're going to, charge you $50,000 or $20,000 or $5,000, or is it a, over the air firmware update that allows it to work? Is it a, $50 part that has to be changed out? Just understand what that might be, just so you know what those things are. Okay. So vehicle to grid, it could really turn into a great way for utilities and EVs to work together to help manage our country's power grid, and a way for fleet owners, EV owners, to all generate a small little return in income and revenue from having this ability to share power back and forth with the grid. It's got potential. Don't know where it'll go, but I know for everybody with large fleets, it's definitely worth looking into today to be prepared for it. All right. So that's it for this week. Next week, we are going to take a look at workplace charging, really kind of look at, kind of the overall thing of workplace charging, some things to consider, and kind of look at that is it a valuable perk or is it an HR nightmare? Okay. There is some concerns here that we have that we like to share with our workforce people, but tune in next week. We'll get into all that. Hopefully you learned something new today, got some ideas about vehicle to grid and what you need to do there if you're building out anything in the fleet realm. And as always, thank you for being here. Hit the button, subscribe, like us, share this post, share this around with people. We'd love to get more listeners in, and we'd love any feedback. If you have a topic we haven't covered or you want us to cover something, you got questions, feel free to send those into us. You can hit them up, info@stayincharge.com. We'll get all that. We'd be more than glad to kind of work with you, answer questions, and come up with stuff and help try to solve problems for anybody out there in the industry that are asking questions. That's what we're here for. So that's all for today, everybody. Enjoy your weekend, and we will see you next week.